morning, friends. Welcome. It's the Dungeon Run Arcane Artistry. It's our special, wonderful chat show with creators in the ttrpg and D&D spaces. I'm Morgan Peter Brown, and
I'm Jared Kajak.
I'm here,
and Ron has polymorphed himself into Morgan Peter Brown.
That's correct. I am here. Ron sends his absolute love. I think he's in chat, but he was unable to join us tonight. But we are so excited, and we're so excited for our guest tonight. It's really flattering that he's here to join us. He is someone who I think a lot of people can relate to in what he does and how he does things. He is a master of the DM tips and tricks for everyone, and he has kind of branded himself the lazy dungeon master. We can get into that. He is the writer.
Smart.
He's the writer and creator. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Being a dungeon master and making the mistake early on where I spent way too much time planning and writing everything out only to have my player characters just run off in some random direction, hunting after a random goblin or something. I have felt the sting. I felt the burn of being an over-prepared dungeon master and not getting to actually use any of it.
I can see that.
But Mike is not only a writer, but he goes by Sly Flourish. He's got his own website, so you guys can Google him, or we'll put his website in chat. He's the author of The Lazy Dungeon Master.
Hang on. Let me bring him in, and so you can read his bio.
I was going to brag about him before he even came on.
Oh, okay. I mean, okay. Yeah. All right. Do it.
That way, he doesn't just have to sit there with this.
That's right. I mean,
quaint look on his face.
They can't see him, but he is doing that.
Please continue.
Yeah.
Who's that?
So he's the writer of the Lazy Dungeon Master, also the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, which I have right here. Pow. The Lazy DM's Companion, Fantastic Adventures, Ruins of the Grendel Route. I don't know what that one is. I'll have to ask about that. And co-author of Fantastic Lairs. Mike has freelanced for a bunch of RPG companies, including Wizards of the Coast, Kobold Press, Pelgrane Press, and Sasquatch Games. Mike has been playing RPGs since the mid-'80s. You're aging yourself there, Mike. And writing for and about RPGs since 2008. Mike also happens to be the son of Robert Shea, author of the 70s cult science fiction novel Illuminatus, with an exclamation point. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey.
I didn't have to sit here on camera blushing the whole time while you're.
Yeah.
Of course, I did write that bio, so I don't know. I can't blush that much. It is, yeah. Thank you.
I should have added something to the bio that wasn't true. Like,
sure.
Like,
which one of these things isn't true? Right.
Don't know anything. He breeds Wiener Schnitzel dogs. I don't know. That's not even a thing.
No.
Morgan, they're saying that you are muted. I don't know if it's because you brought.
Oh, that's why. Because hang on one second. And I'm back, baby. Apologies.
Okay,
there we go. Continue.
All right. So, Mike, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Yeah. I'm in a great spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great moment. Great time.
Okay.
You're
coming to us from where?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I missed a question.
Go ahead, Jared.
You're coming to us from where? Where are you at currently?
Physically, or in
Yes.
my good state?
Both.
Both. So I'm physically on the East Coast United States, in just outside of Washington D.C.
Oh, okay.
And
nice.
I'm in a good state because I just finished a Kickstarter and delivered it, which is the best part of the Kickstarter. Not after you finish the Kickstarter part isn't the good part. That's the hard part. But now I'm at the good part where it has been delivered.
I did one Kickstarter years ago and can verify that for sure.
Yes, yes, and I haven't yet started the next one, so I'm in a fine state of.
What was your Kickstarter?
So it was for the third of the Lazy Dungeon Masters books, known as the Lazy DM's Companion, and it is. I think I have a copy somewhere right here. So
nice.
And it was the first time that I did offset printing for a book. I had always done print on demand, and offset printing is a whole different world. It's really where you become a publisher. Like even if you're an independent publisher, you aren't officially a publisher, and it was crazy stressful. It was really hard, and it was really stressful. And I partnered with some wonderful people and wonderful companies that helped me get this done, and it was still a tremendous amount of work. And now having it done and having 5,000 people got physical copies of their books, and 10,000 people got, about 12,000 people got physical and digital copies. So lots of people out there, and the response has been great. They like it, and that's always fantastic.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you.
The idea behind the show, behind Arcane Artistry, is we like to bring the people that you read their material, you see their art, you maybe enjoy whatever performance they may be creating, whether it's music or what have you, but you don't necessarily get to meet the person. So that's why we started doing these, is we wanted to bring the people that have, especially the people like you that have informed our show or helped us become better dungeon masters. I know Ron constantly talks about how much your books have helped him become a better dungeon master, and he actually is the one that convinced me to go and get the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and we've been using that for our campaign too. So thank you so much for being on our show. And before we jump into all of the great questions from our Patreon and from Discord, is there anything that you would like to ask us?
I don't think so. How's it gonna go? Like as for the future, like how did it go?
Oh, that's fascinating.
I don't think you know that answer yet. So
I think
that's true.
I think that's a great question, though. I love that. We'll see.
We can get to that later on in the show. Yeah, sure.
It's gonna go beautifully. That's why I'll be confident.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're just a bunch of guys hanging out talking about D&D.
Oh, yeah.
So
Hard to beat that.
Doesn't get any better than that.
That's my bread and butter.
And there's lots of lovely people in chat. Hello, Lady Carriel. Hey, Cjo225. Tua Mask, we see you. Thank you so much for being here. If you folks have any questions for us or for Mike, feel free to put them in chat. I will try to save them as best as possible. And then that way, when we're done answering Patreon and what have you, we'll come back and answer your questions. Or if you have a follow-up question on a topic that we're talking about, put it in chat and we will definitely get to it. So, Morgan, do you want to fire the first round or shall I?
Please be my guest. I'm working on some sound things right here. So yeah, take it away,
okay.
Jared.
Okay. So I'm actually going to start with a Discord question first, and then I'll go back to Patreon. Vegan Draculich asks, Are there any great tips that a lazy DM can use to incorporate a player's self-created backstory into a campaign, homebrew or otherwise?
Well, that's there. You're throwing the fastballs right away.
Should I start with an easier one?
No, that's fine.
What got you into D&D?
Right, like that's an easy one. And, yeah,
I do want to talk about your dad's sci-fi books, though. We'll get there.
Sure. Yeah. I think so. The thing that has helped me the most in that area, like when you have players who are really creative and drive the backstory of their characters, it's really great if you can seed them with the theme of the campaign that you're going to run before they start doing that. And if you know it, I have not had successful games where I've let them build their characters first, and then I try to build a campaign around their characters.
Oh, really?
Well, you also have like 6 people.
Yeah.
And they all have different ideas going off in different directions that aren't necessarily in the right in the same direction.
Not at all.
And trying to wrangle that. I'll tell you where that works really well is solo game, one-on-one D&D games. I've had the opportunity
still have never done
one-on-one D&D games. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. You think it's like not real D&D, or that's the D&D you need to play when you can't get 5 or 6 people, but it is a wonderful way to play.
That's actually how I got started. I was DMing my younger brother, and all he wanted to do was kill things.
Right. And the great thing is, like, if you're kind of a servant DM who who builds the world around the character,
Yeah.
they can go whatever direction they're going to go, and you can build the world in front of them because it's only one person. But when it's 6 people or 5 people going off in different directions, now it's a lot harder to build a world that can help them all.
Yeah.
So I'm probably a little bit more dictatorial in this than some are. That if I have an idea, I'll pitch the players on the theme of a campaign. Hey, this is what it's generally going to be about. This is what you can expect. This is where it's going to go. And then I try to seed them with like one sentence that motivates their character. So an example would be like in Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Yeah.
If I'm running that campaign, I would say, hey, whatever characters you choose, one of your things is your goal is to work with your companions to help the people of 10 Towns survive the endless night.
Right.
And it gives a few key points that help them out. And suddenly all of these dorky odd jobs that they're doing for people in 10 Towns makes sense because their characters are there to help the people of 10 Towns survive the endless night. So as long as it fits within that, it fits. But otherwise, if you say like your job is to end the endless night, or they think that's what their job is and that's what they go for, and then you're like, hey, I need you to go get the ale in this other town and bring it to this other town. You're like, why am I doing that?
Why do I care?
Why do I care?
Yeah.
So when you can seed them ahead of time with the theme of the campaign, with the understanding that you've already gotten an agreement from the player that this is the kind of campaign they want to play in first.
Sure.
Once they've said, yeah, oh yeah, you're going to run Empire of the Ghouls by Kobold Press. Yeah, that sounds cool. You've told them about it. They're interested in it. They're interested to try a new world. They're on board with the theme. Then you say, okay, here's this seed that's gonna drive your characters. And it does a few things. Like I always put in that like you and your companions are going to work together to do X, because I don't want the loner characters. I don't want the one guy who's like, I don't like people and I don't like going on adventures, and unless I can steal from them or stab them, I'm not interested in being with other people. And you're like, great, that's now a villain, and I'll put him in my NPC. Now make another character that does want to work with people. So I'm a little bit harder about that, because what I found running, probably a dozen campaigns this way, is the campaigns are so much smoother. It still gives them lots of freedom. It still gives them lots of direction on where they can go with their characters and what they can do. But you still have this central motivation that can help propel the campaign forward with 5 people that all have big ideas. And there could still, so I've had a lot of success in that.
I think that's fascinating, and I was curious about that too, because I've heard other people talking about, as the lazy dungeon master, which feels mean when I say it to you, but I know it's part of your thing.
It's the title of my book.
Okay, great. As I say, you made excellent use of it. I think I was curious if you find that puts more emphasis on how you go into the campaign, and it sounds like that's true. Whether you do it as a session 0 or back at character creation, and you're like, everybody at least needs to have a couple things in
like
common. Yeah, there should be a bond, and you're right where it's where the style you're talking about makes the kind of everybody create randos and we'll dump them in the pot and see how it goes, and maybe that'll work out, but it's unsure.
Maybe. I'm trying to think back. I certainly didn't do it this dictatorial in the past.
This is, I say that you've been doing this a while, so this is a learned thing.
I have, but the whole idea of like having that central theme, I wonder how far back that went. I wonder when I started doing that.
Was it
6 campaigns or so?
There's somebody, was it Steve Jobs? There's some like titan of industry who said, I'll prefer to give jobs to my lazy workers because I know they'll find the fast and most efficient way to do it.
Well, that's a common thing with programmers, right? Lazy programmers are good programmers because they don't want to write the same code more than once.
Makes sense.
So I don't know how far back that went. But I remember very clearly, like an example where I used to run open games at a local game shop, and anybody could kind of come up and join. And I remember there was like a kid, who was kind of a, teenager or younger teenager who kind of walked into the store, and he's like, oh, you guys are playing D&D. Can I play? I'm like, yeah, sure. And he dropped in his character and immediately was like the edgelord. Like, oh, I don't like going with other people. I'm going to go in this other direction, do this other thing. And we had to stop and be like, you're not going to have fun at this game because I'm just going to ignore your character if you don't go along with the rest of the group. And he's like, well, that's what my character would do. And this breaks that idea of like, you can do what your character would do. Your character wants to do this, and I'm going to hand you this thing, right? This one motivation that all the other things your character wants to do is fine.
Right.
They also want to do this. And that is group with the other adventurers to follow through on whatever the theme of this campaign is.
Yeah, Jared,
stop the rise of Tiamat.
Jared, good point. Jared and I both come from like acting and improvisation and dungeon run, where we're all professional actors and improvisers. And that, what you're talking about, that is very much a thing in improv and performance as well, where there's just sort of like, I don't care what you're doing. If I'm in a scene with you, you could be juggling on a unicycle and I'm going to play my scene the exact same way. And those people are no fun. Just telling you now, they're no fun. You know?
Yeah.
I also,
I
think there's something to be said for asking the question, why? Why do those players want that experience? And from my experience, usually the reason why a player wants that edgelord, as you put it, is because they read a book or they played a video game where they were the single hero, and they want to relive that experience.
They want to play Skyrim.
Exactly.
Yeah, the alternative is also true, though. I've seen this also with the younger players, where it's the first time they've had a game that doesn't have bounds like a video game has.
Sure.
It's the first time where, you know, I'll be a little bit crude. A friend of mine's son was like, we met, and I was like, I mean, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I write D&D books. And he's like, you write D&D? I love D&D. And he's there with his mom and dad. He's like, D&D, you could, you know, I'll use nice words, right? You can go to the bathroom wherever you want, right? And his mom and dad are like, you know, Josh, like, you know, he didn't use the word go to the bathroom.
I mean, you can.
Right. And I was like, that's not exactly the main drive, but it was that idea that the bounds are off, that there aren't, you have that, and that, so you can be this other character, that you can do it. And it's like, you can and so it's actually kind of bringing them back in a little bit to video gamey roots of like, there's still a storyline in this video game, and you can go off and do side quests, but that main storyline is still there, and that's generally what you're going to be following.
You can ignore the evil sorcerer for as long as you want. They're still going to keep doing bad stuff.
They're still going to keep doing what they do. So I think sometimes I find that trying to draw people back, you've got to hold them back from that explosive creativity, sometimes needs to happen in order to just have a game that runs smooth. And I'm not, you know, I mean, if you've seen any of my stuff or read any of my stuff, you know that I'm not like a table pounding dictatorial DM that has like, I have a story I'm going to tell, and damn it, you're going to follow that story. I have wide open stories with lots of different things that can happen. The characters have huge impact in those stories, but I still want that. It's not so much that I want them to go my direction. I want them all to go in the direction of everyone else.
Right.
I want the 5 of them to be heading down one single path instead of 5 different paths.
Right. You want them to work as a team, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Now, so if you don't know this, Mike, Sly Flourish has an incredible YouTube library as well of so many clips, short clips for DMs. It's just tips on everything. I feel like I barely scratched the surface, and I've been looking at it for a few weeks now. But one thing I was noticing, and I think plays off of what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of what you preach is kind of transparency with your players, a little bit just being like, you know, is this what the group wants? Is this, you know, this is the path we're heading down? Where recently you just put up a thing about hitting pause on the game for a moment and just kind of pulling back to be with everybody in the table and be like, this, just so we're clear on what's happening right now, is this the game we want to play? And can you talk a little bit about that, because to me that feels like it's not letting them peek behind the screen so much, but it's kind of, you're not the puppet master, you know, you're not pulling all the strings. Well, you can be, but you are sort of letting them have more agency in the type of story you all are telling together.
Yeah. So the thing that I've found, and this has evolved over time. So there's a whole list of different kind of safety tools that you can use in your RPGs. X-Card is probably the most popular of them.
Right.
There's a system
Lines
called
and
Script
Veils
Change.
and such. Yeah.
Yeah, Lines and Veils, right,
Yeah.
and which are fantastic. And there's one called Script Change by Bo Sheldon, that is a you can kind of think of like the buttons on a VCR. I don't know if people know what VCRs are, but like I do. You could pause, right? Pause, play, play, pause, fast forward, rewind, stuff like that. And I haven't found all of them to be particularly, so like the fast forward, I could kind of see like, hey, let's move on, or hang on, let's slow down a little bit. I've lost something. But that idea of pausing is important. And what I found is, as I was transitioning from physical play, like during COVID, I moved from 100% in-person play to 100% online play for 2 years. And now I've had like more than 100 games online, and having never had any games online before. And I found that like the X card, I had situations where I wasn't fast enough moving on trying to deal with an X card situation because I missed it. I just didn't see that it was happening because it's like I'm switching windows and I'm doing all this stuff and you know, pops up and I just it was in the chat and I didn't see it.
Yeah.
So I came up with another. I kind of riffed off of the idea of script change and said we're going to have a thing called pause for a minute. It's either pause for a second or pause for a minute. You pick either one. And I now in my session 0, I say like at any point in the game, anybody can say pause for a minute. And then bring up a question. And the minute you say pause for a minute, everyone else stops talking. Everyone breaks out a character. And as a bunch of players, we talk about whatever the situation is. And it's not just a safety tool. It can be just a clarity tool. It can be just pause for a minute. Are we all good with this direction that we're going?
Just so we understand a little bit of the ramifications of what is happening right now.
And boy, I'm playing in this Numenera campaign right now, and this like literal world-ending stuff. And there was one session where they had 3 different world-ending entities that they were negotiating with, any one of which could have destroyed the entire planet. And they're figuring out which ones of these are our friends, which ones are our enemies, which one are we going to use against the other, and how are we going to do this so that the world doesn't end? And like when they're, you know, players are talking about it and they're talking in character and they're doing all this stuff and making all these deals, and it's like 4 people are for it and 1 person's against it, and you're like, when it's a world-ending situation, you kind of want a unanimous vote. And so that's where I said, like, pause for a minute. As players, are we all good with the direction that we're talking here? I know your character isn't into it because your character has a belief that goes against this idea. As a player, are you okay if that's the direction this goes? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. Like, this is, you know, right. My character doesn't agree. I think it's cool. I think we're going to see how this plays out. It's going to be wild. It's my character who's not into it. And I'm like, and you're okay if your character's not into it, I still go there. And yes, okay, back in. And then we just game on, and we're right back into the game again.
It's kind of like
to just check in.
I was going to say it's kind of like character death in that way, where like if you ask me, you know, the number of times over our last campaign was 115 episodes. We were all the way up to level 13, Jared, by the end, I think.
13,
yeah. And there were several times where I'm like, I don't think my character's going to make it, guys. You know, my human warlock is in trouble. But I had said to the table and to Jeff, our dungeon master, many times, I'm fine if he dies a bit, but even though I don't want it to happen, if it's what's best for the story, and I would be fascinated to see what would happen, I'm not gonna try to make it happen. But also if it does happen, I'm all good with it. Yes. Yeah. Because it's just sort of, as the storyteller, I'm just fascinated to stand back and then just see what happens. You know? Yeah. I love that.
So then the nice thing that I found is, as a GM, I use it all the time. And I do it for 2 reasons. One is because I think it's really useful to just break character, make sure everybody's cool. Again, it's not always a safety thing. It can be, but it sometimes it's just direction that the story's going. Or are we taking too long with this scene or whatever? And so I'll bring it up. And in some cases, like I had one in Rime of the Frostmaiden where I was like, let's pause for a minute. Is everybody okay with his character casting Animate Dead on those 2 dead drow warriors that you just killed so that they can work as like undead scouts for your group? And somebody's like, you forgot that we had an undead zombie carrying all our crap for like the last month. I'm like, oh, you're right. I forgot you already had this moral choice. Never mind. We're good.
Necromancy, all necromancy requires an immediate pause for a minute.
Like, yeah, you remember we had the goat that was in front of the zombie ogre. So the zombie ogre's trying to get to the goat, and the goat's just walking ahead, and the zombie ogre's carrying the big cart full of loot. I was like, that's right. Now I remember that whole thing.
Wow.
So they already had like a whole. They'd already.
They're like, we've been good with it, Mike. We're fine.
And so as a GM, it's now my practice to kind of use it often, and that makes it, you know, more normal for players to use it too when they want to use it. And it can be like, I'm lost. Where are we? Like, I'm sorry, I was distracted. What happened in this last scene again? Can somebody remind me what happened? And then sure. And this was happening. Oh, okay, now I'm back in. So it doesn't, you know, it can be used for anything. It's just a convenient way to pause the game, break out a character, talk as players, hit play again, and go right back into the game again. So I really like that.
Yeah, I think that connects well into one of our questions from our Patreon. Tapartos asks, what's your favorite type of adventure to either write about or read about? So do you like that style of adventure where it's the Rime of the Frostmaiden, where there's a lot of
Do you like high
and,
fantasy?
No,
or do you enjoy a little more?
I really didn't like Rhyme with Frosting.
Not your vibe.
Well, not my favorite. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
ran it for 2 groups, but didn't
yeah. So if you got to choose, if you got to, write an adventure, let's say, in any setting, what would you choose to write about right now, and what do you like to read?
Oh, that's that. Yeah. So I think they might be 2 different answers.
Okay.
What I like to write situations, and I like to run situations, and I believe
Premises.
in this.
Yeah.
Well, this idea that there's a thing going on in the world, there's a location where it's going. There are clear reasons why the characters want to get involved, clear goals why the characters want to get involved. There's sort of a living situation going on. There's like different groups, either monsters or humanoids or whatever, that are in this place doing whatever they're doing. And it's up to the players to figure out how they're going to navigate this situation to accomplish their goal, which is different than a traditional sort of scene-based adventure where you have a series of scenes that are tied together, and the scenes are going to happen a certain way, and they want to do it. So if you think about a heist is a really good model, a very common model for a situation-based adventure, because it's like you've got a location that you have to break into, you have a thing that you have to steal. There's people who don't want you to steal it. There's probably some kind of goofy complication that happens along the way, and so there's this nice formula that you can run. And I just wrote something. I'm on my own Patreon. I wrote an adventure toolkit that's built around a heist. Ooh. Where there's a manor, there's somebody who lives at this manor. She's like very politically connected, but also an evil cultist. Because I love cultists.
Sure. Politically connection, evil cultists.
Yeah, and
they often go together.
And in this toolkit, I have like, here's a bunch of reasons why you might be breaking into her house that aren't necessarily like, there's could be 4 different ones, and you get to pick which one. The DM that's using this product would pick which one they want to use as their adventure, whether it's a toolkit instead of an adventure. And then there's an ecology. There's people that are there. There's people who aren't on board with what she's doing. There's people that are. There's, the people that are fanatically loyal to her. There's the people that are total mercenary. And that way the players have something to kind of navigate and deal with while they're dealing with this situation. And what I love about those is like, I have no idea how they're going to go. And it does give players a lot of agency about how they're going to approach this. Are you going to break in? Are you going to sneak in? Right. Are you going to lie to people? Are you going to pretend to be cultists yourself? What are you going to do? I don't know. And and hopefully it gives enough tools to the DM to be able to run it. Because that's, I think that's scary for people. They want to have like a procedural scenes, right. And this isn't, but hopefully you have enough materials in front of you to be able to run it and have that very sort of improvisational game, but it's not 100% improv. You've got a bunch of stuff in front of you that you're going to be able to use.
That's amazing.
I've things to rely on.
Yeah, so I really loved writing that. So I'll share 2 things that I've read that I really liked. I just read the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle adventure for the new D&D starter set.
Ooh,
and
it's
only available in Target in the States right now. I think it's October. It's going to be available to everybody. And yeah, it's the new starter set adventure. It just came out.
I have been running Icespire Peak for friends.
Yes.
And
right. So
been...
this is the new,
amazing.
New starter set, right? And it's got a new adventure.
Icespire Peak has been the source of some frustration of mine, but go ahead.
Oh, really? Interesting. So like Dragon of Icespire Peak, I think is my #1 favorite adventure.
No kidding.
And yeah, and I think why is because it manages to pack a lot of stuff into a very short amount of very small number of pages.
That's true.
And it's a big adventure, and also it's like $8 or $12 depending where you go buy it. So you get a lot of D&D for your $1.
What it's good for, I find that it's good for also working other things into it, because it's kind of murky on the edges.
It's right. It's not. It doesn't hold
kind
your
of
hand.
Loose. No, it's sort of loose. Yeah, go ahead.
But I really like the style of, I've used this, I looked at it, I'm like, I love this model. The quest board model where there's 3 quests, and after the characters accomplish 2, the 3rd is dumped and 3 new quests go up. Is a great way of giving them lots of options. It's a good economical way to give them lots of options about what they want to do, and give them something they clearly don't want to do and throw it out the window. Right. I like that style.
Gotta go back and do that 3rd one. No, you don't.
So that economy, and I think Chris Perkins wrote it.
Yes.
And Chris Perkins also wrote Light of Xerxes, which is the new Spelljammer adventure. And that one has that same economy of words. that they clearly wrote this knowing that people are busy and that you're going to have a lot of information to them in as few words as possible to give them the opportunity to run this kind of adventure. And we were talking a little bit before the show. I've got other nitpicky problems with the Spelljammer box set, but the one thing I really like is the adventure in it. I think is really solid. Not having run it yet, I'll let you know once I've run it if it is really solid. But reading it, I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to running it. And part of it is because like I was able to digest a pretty good, big, epic story in a relatively short product.
Amazing. And you were saying, so I'm sorry, I disrupted you slightly, but you were saying the adventure of the Dragon of Stormwreck Isle, how much you're enjoying reading.
Yeah, same thing, right? Same that they managed to pack a lot of D&D into not a lot of words, and
Amazing.
and that one looks like I'm actually the campaign I'm going to be running starts with Stormwreck Isle and then leads into Light of Xeraxis, and I'm going to run that for my group or one of my groups, and they're all hardcore vets. So even though I'm using a starter set adventure, like I think it's going to be just fine running that with people that are all D&D veterans.
Awesome.
So you were saying something earlier that I want to go back to. You have this. You wrote a heist campaign. We had a heist in our season
I started
1.
laughing because go ahead,
and
Jared.
People in chat were commenting on it as well. It did not go well. It in fact blew up in our face.
Wasn't our DM's fault.
Right. So a lot of stuff went down.
A lot of stuff happened.
My spin-off question from that is, you write this heist module or this quest, right?
Yeah.
There's this cultist queen or whatever she is, this heiress or something.
She's a councilwoman, but go ahead.
Councilwoman. Okay, thank you.
An alderman.
Yeah.
She's designed to be something that the characters face later on at the end, right? I'm assuming.
Not necessarily. I don't know.
Wide
I
open.
don't know how to play out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what would you do? This is kind of throwing a little bit of a hypothetical curveball at you, but what would you do if, let's say, in that quest, it was designed that they were supposed to face her at the end or fight her at the end?
That's the problem right there. But go ahead.
and they hit her head on.
Yeah.
And they're not ready for her because they don't have any information. They don't have the right items. They don't have the right spells or power. You as the DM, put yourself in that situation. What do you then do to pull the lever and evacuate the cockpit or whatever analogy you want to use? Like, how do you get around?
So I'm gonna make like dictatorial statements with the recognition that like advice is BS, and I really don't know. Like every table's different. There's so many right ways to do this. I have my right way. There are many other right ways. So I'm qualifying my table pounding thing here. It feels like I can say this definitively. In my experience, it falls apart the minute you have a statement like the players are going to face the final boss at this moment. You've already determined that it's going to go a certain way. Right. And the minute you've determined that it's going to go a certain way, you can almost be sure it's not going to go that way. Right. And in my heist-based adventure, I have no idea when they're going to face her. And it's possible that if they do go, like it could be, and if you're a DM in that scene, and it's like, so mine wasn't a campaign, mine's an adventure. So like they're the same level from the minute they start the heist to the minute they face the boss. But let's say you were doing this longer campaign where, so I'll give you, I ran a Storm King's Thunder campaign, and I'm going to spoil Storm King's Thunder, but it's been around for years. So pardon me for spoiling Storm King's Thunder. But there's a boss in that adventure who is a blue dragon. In my campaign, she was a blue dragon sorceress, a 20th level blue dragon sorceress, which that gives her a lot of stuff she can do, including making simulacrums of herself. So she has 2 blue dragons that you have to face because one's a simulacrum.
Why not?
Fantastic stuff. So in that game, they had a heist where they had to go onto a gambling barge and steal some information, and I had her show up. I thought it would be fun. Like, what if she polymorphed into a human being, comes on board the ship, and the players immediately know it's her, and they're like, "That's her, isn't it?" And they're like, "Yeah," and she knows who we are, doesn't she? And they're like, "Yeah, like, we got to stay out of sight because this could be like a nuclear bomb going off in the middle of this pleasure barge, right? Like, because she's an ancient blue dragon and we're like adventurers and she doesn't like it." So I really thought, like, I don't know, I told the players, I'm like, that could have ended up with like a mushroom cloud.
TPK.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, it could not just a TPK, but every NPC might have died, right? Like it wasn't just the characters that died. So then it's like you have to have this like, well, what if mentality of like, what if she does? What would she do with him? And if we're doing this thing where you have a cult leader and she's really powerful, and the party decides we're going to face her, and they don't realize like, you know, she's an archmage, like she's going to cast meteor swarm on you, and that's going to be that. It's like they wake up and they're now the ones bound to the pillars down in the sacrificial hall.
Wow.
Right.
And she's like, I'm getting ready to sacrifice all you guys to summon the great demon from below. Oh man, I got a party I gotta get to. I forgot. I got people upstairs, but I'll be right back for you guys. And then she goes upstairs and like, we got to get out of these manacles right now. And how do you turn the situation? If you have this of like anything can go wrong, will go wrong. If you're thinking about that what if scenario, and always think about like, well, how does this fail forward? Like, how does this happen where even in a TPK, where is this going to go? I had this great campaign where they were going to face Orcus, and Orcus had I got Orcus on my shirt, and they
for those of you that don't know who Orcus is, he's one of the demon kings. So
he's a demon prince of undeath. Yeah, he's the demon prince of undeath. He's
essentially a demon god.
He's the source. He's the source of liches. In 5th edition lore, he is the source of liches. Liches owe their fealty to Orcus. In my campaign, he was becoming the god of death. He had killed the current neutral god of death and taken a spark of her being and was using it, and now had become Orcus, the god of death. So he's even more powerful than normal Orcus would be.
Great.
Wow, and it was 30th level 4th edition campaign, so they could, the power levels were, all the meters were off the spike anyway.
Yeah, right.
And I said, like, what happens if they lose? Like, I made him really hard, which for 4th edition is really hard to do. And I was like, I made him really, really hard. And I was like, it's very possible he could kill everybody. And I'm like, if that happens, what happens? I'm like, if that happens, they're going to be dug out of our charnel pit by a bunch of cultists who worship them, because they were the last ones to face Orcus before he became the god of death. And the world would have been taken over by Orcus for like 100 years. And they have to then redo the campaign that way. So I was like, that idea was so much fun. I'm like, now I really hope they TPK, because like, I really want to run that campaign. And they didn't. They beat him, and it was fine. And I was like, great. And then they're like, what would have happened? And I'm like, you'd have come back 100 years later, and Orcus would have been ruling over. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad that didn't happen. So
and you're like, I'm not.
I think, yeah, right, yeah. I don't know either. But that's part of it. It's like, either way, I'm good. And I think if one can get themselves into that headspace of like, I am good with whatever direction the story goes. Mm-hmm. I am good if they kill the boss with one hit on the many sessions before they were supposed to face him, equally much as doing that boss fight later on. Right. Then I'm happier, because like I don't have these preset expectations about how something is going to go that then get thwarted, because I don't have any expectations. And it's always fun for me when my players are like, did you know that was going to happen? And I'm like, of course not. I had a campaign that jumped 14 months in the future because of a random magic item.
Whoa.
And I had to roll with it, and it was awesome, and it changed the campaign completely. And all the villainous plots, all the things the villains were doing, escalated 14 months in the future. Like, they literally woke up and it's like the air is mostly methane now, because they've been re-engineering the entire atmosphere of the planet. And they're like, uh-oh, I could barely breathe anymore. So it was, it's when you can get into that state where you can really let the game roll whatever direction it rolls, and it ends up in a wild space. It's for me, it's way more fun as a DM to watch that story unfold.
Sounds like it. Yeah, I think
that actually lends itself into our other Patreon question from Idaho Judd, which I think you've already answered. What's one of the most memorable moments of any game you've ever played?
That would be
second part of it, though. Second part.
Yeah.
What were some of the choices a DM can make in order to help make those moments happen?
Sure. Oh, this is a good one. So I would say certainly in recent memory, and maybe as far back as I can think of, having it where we rolled a random magic item, D100, 1 in 100 magic item that then had a 1 in 100 chance to do the thing it did, and a player decided to use it in the middle of a battle, not knowing what it did, and it teleported 4 of the 6 characters 14 months into the future. 2 of the characters are left behind, and they lived 14 months. So those players, because the players weren't there that session. So I told them, hey guys, guess what? During the last adventure, it jumped 14 months. You guys need to tell me what you guys have been doing over the past 14 months to fight back this onslaught of evil. And it was awesome. Like, and it made this campaign just awesome. Same campaign where they had the 3 world-ending entities that they were dealing with before. This is a high scope, high stakes campaign. And the thing that made that work for me was not having a plot that was driven by the actions of the characters, but by knowing what the bad guys were going to do.
Yeah.
And all I had to do was move the timetable forward. So I knew, and I had to think about like, well, which parts of the timetable am I going to move forward so that the game is still fun?
Right.
Because you don't want to be like, you wake up and you lost.
Everyone is dead.
Right. Right. But there is, I don't know if you read like the book Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. There's a very popular fantasy novel.
I've yet
Mistborn,
to dig into the Brandon Sanderson library, but I've heard such amazing things.
Sure. So the neat thing about Mistborn is like, what if Sauron had won? Right? What if the main villain had already won, and now you're in this world where the villain already won? And how are you going to deal with this? Right? It's not night. It's not like the world is about to end. It's like, no, it did. It already happened, and now you're in there. And so being able to kind of roll that forward and say all of these things that, hey, remember that town? Like they had a quest, which was go save this town because they're going to get attacked. It was a very Seven Samurai. Hey, this town is going to get attacked by this army of synthetic robot people, and you need to go and protect the town. And they're like, we'll get to that right as soon as we're done raiding this vault. And the vault is where they use the 14-month thing. Well, guess what? That town got taken over. And now they're like, oh, should we go back to that Scarlet Watch, that town? And it's like, well, if you go there, it's occupied by the guys that took it over a year ago, right? And now, and they did. They went there and they got to see, oh man, we would have saved this place, but we weren't here. And now we have to save it, only it's occupied. And it changed the situation. So being able to look at what your campaign is like and what your villains are doing. I kind of talk a lot about like seeing through the eyes of your villain. Like if you look at your villains, and maybe you have multiple villains, I like to have 3. If you have 3 different villains, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing right now?
What's their intention? What do they like? What do they really want? Yeah.
But like, what do they see? Like physically, what are they seeing? Are they just sitting on a throne waiting for stuff to happen? Or are they like sending aid? Like, these characters are real problems. Right. I'm going to go send some assassins after those guys because I'm tired of dealing with their crap. They keep killing all my lieutenants. So I'm going to go hire some multidimensional assassins and go send them after them. and so what are they doing? What are they doing? What is their goal? What quests are they on to accomplish that goal? And how do they change as the characters are dorking with their world? Like how do they react to the things that the characters are doing? But what I don't do is say, and I expect this is going to happen. Right. And I expect that the characters are going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. I don't play chess that two moves out because I don't know what the next move is going to really be. Now, I generally have an idea. Like, I bet there's going to be a boss fight. I bet they're going to face that dragon one day, right? And I'll think about that, but I don't do it in a lot of detail until it's time, because things could change radically.
So does that mean most of the time everything that you run is open?
I mean, I have a North Star. I generally know that, like, I know who the boss is of Storm King's Thunder, and I know one day they're going to face her. Do I know what the circumstances might be? Maybe not. And
I was going to say,
I changed it a fair bit from what's in the book because I had ideas about what I wanted to do once we got closer to it.
It almost sounds like the two things that you're saying would almost work like against each other, which is like having this being wide open about things, but then it also sounds like you run a lot of modules, adventures, whatever you call them, and so, but it's like taking just the broad stuff from the books and saying, like, here's your bad guy, here's your setting, here's the chapters maybe, but you sound like you, again, expectations truly out the window, which saying you're throwing expectations out the window and truly doing them is actually quite difficult. So kudos to you for seemingly mastering that.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at like a published adventure, a published campaign adventure as a toolkit for me, and I'll use it as much as I want to use it, and I will change it however I want to change it. I don't owe it anything.
Sure.
Like they owe me. I paid them money. I
bought the book.
I want material. Right.
Right.
I want material that's going to help me run games. Right. I don't owe anybody the idea that I will run this adventure come hell or high water the way it's written.
Yeah.
And I almost never do. And to me, the adventures that I buy that I really like are the ones where I don't feel like I have to modify them to run them as is, but I have the freedom to do so. And so, like, Wild Beyond, I ran Rime of the Frost Maiden, which I felt like I had to do a lot of work to get Rime of the Frost Maiden in a spot where I wanted it to be.
It seemed more linear. Yeah.
Well, beyond the linearity, there's just a lot of, I could spend a half hour about why I didn't like Rime. But there's lots of problems that I felt like I had to do work to get that to work. Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which came out right afterwards, I didn't feel like that. I loved Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and I modified both of them almost the same way, or almost like as much.
The same amount, yeah.
Yeah, but for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I didn't feel like I had to, and I felt like what that meant was there weren't spots that I had to change. I could just change the ones I wanted to, and so I changed like the entire villain in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. It's barely even a villain, but I took out the main antagonist group that was in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, replaced it with a different one that I wanted, and it worked great. It was just wildly fun, but I still felt like that adventure gave me everything that I needed if I wanted to run it as is, which meant I got to pick and choose what to change. Where Rime of the Frost Maiden, there were things I knew for me to enjoy it, I was going to have to change.
I feel like you're answering these questions before I can get to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's one or two that I'm like, he's definitely covered those.
Yeah, so
awesome.
Vegan Draculich just, he posted this earlier, but do you have any advice for a lazy DM who has experience with homebrew worlds and campaigns, but who is now, for the first time, trying to run a pre-written campaign? I feel like you literally just answered that question.
Yeah.
So
sure. I mean, I could expand on that a little bit, but sure. Yeah.
I think one of the questions
we got lots of other good questions too.
One of the other Discord questions was specifically about challenge rating, and I feel like I know how you're going to answer this because of how you've been talking. But
I could talk all day about challenge rating.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it's, with challenge rating, it does sound like, again, expectations. People get so caught up in challenge rating because they're like, oh, that was too easy. And I feel like your advice is let it be easy.
It depends. So I am a big believer. So I think a common thing that I hear about, a common thing I hear from a lot of DMs and see from a lot of DMs, and I try to poke into a lot of corners of the internet to just lurk and see how DMs talk to each other and see the kind of problems that they talk about with one another. Right. And something that I think is probably true is a lot of DMs only ever run hard battles. That they're always that every battle is a way to challenge the characters, and so they tend to run a lot of times they're using like a virtual tabletop, and they run a tactical encounter with a battle map and objectives and terrain and different monster types and monster roles and all kinds of things, and they don't run easy battles. And I'm a big believer that you should, generally speaking, in my opinion, and you should. I always try to avoid saying you should, because everybody's different. Everybody can play this game however they enjoy. But again, an experience that has worked well for me is that I like
that
to
on a t-shirt. An experience that
has worked well for me. That I can speak authoritatively and definitively about my own experiences. I can't say how everybody else should do it. And that I try to start by saying, like, well, what monsters and in what number make sense for the current situation? Right. That if they're walking through a castle, is it really that every hallway is filled with like 5 veterans and 4 archers that are strategically set up to? No, it's like they're 2 guys drinking, right? Like, what makes sense given the circumstances in the situation? And then next, what would make it the most fun for the current point in the game? So like, generally speaking, I don't define combat encounters specifically until I'm in the middle of the game. And then the 2 things I balance it with are A, what makes sense given the situation, and B, what would be fun? Because sometimes they've had a lot of hard battles. And you know what they don't want more of? Another hard battle. What's fun? Jumping 2 guys that have been drinking and playing dice. And it's like, we could totally take these guys. Maybe we don't even have to take these guys. Maybe we just threaten them and we get a lot of info out of them.
Right.
So I definitely believe in like oscillating between easy and hard battles.
That's when you can catch your players off guard too.
Yeah, right. Well, then sometimes it could be really hard. Oh, I've had an easy time. And then you walk in and it's like, well, you just walked into the mage convention. Right. And, what was that game? It's like that dude who was.
And they're holding a panel on Fireball. Uh-oh.
Fireball day. Right. There's that great real life situation where a guy like robbed somebody and ran into a dojo full of Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys to hide, and they just beat the crap out of the dude, right? And so it's like that. What's that situation? It's like, oh, we're having a really easy time, and then you kick in the door, and it's like all the hobgoblins in phalanx practice mode, and they're like, hey, look. So and like you can change those situations in the middle of the game. The one part where I think like I'm on board with a lot of everybody else is boss fights. And in boss fights, it's really worth trying to make sure that those feel like a fun challenge, that those are stretching it. Because like, a lot of D&D is the mechanics of combat, like a good third of it, so at least a third. Some people would say it's more. And you want scenes where you can really stretch those muscles. You can see all of the different things that exist. You can watch the characters do the things that the characters are good at. But that doesn't necessarily mean building a challenging encounter. That could be building an encounter that gets to show the characters what they can do.
Right.
And that means, like, you know, I laugh about it, but like I've had this conversation with another publisher who publishes lots of like hardcore 5e monsters. And I was like, you know, whenever I have a bunch of like low CR monsters charge up against a group, they're always in a 20-foot radius. Right? Like, you know, it's always like, because you want it to feel like John Wick, right? You don't want it to feel like this, like a chess game. You want to throw a fireball and watch people go flying through the air like a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. You know, or Michael Bay, right? You want like huge explosions. And I asked my wife this. I was like, would you be disappointed if you're playing a mage and, you know, a bunch of skeletons are charging down a hall, and I describe it as a you know, 25 skeletons charge at you in a 20-foot diameter, you know, 20-foot radius circle. And she goes, no, that'd be awesome. Because I know exactly what I can do.
Got it.
And it's like, you know, even if you're totally tongue in cheek, and even if you're like, yeah, I set these guys up to be fireballed,
Right.
you know, they still like fireballing them.
It still feels good.
How do you, right. So how do you build encounters that show off character abilities, or that,
right.
you know, if you're annoyed, this is something I've been doing a lot recently, that if you're annoyed that your new 7th level cleric is casting banish every battle and taking one of your monsters and just put a banishable monster in your fight, right?
Guilty.
Have that big stupid guy, you know, and you're like, everyone else, like the boss has legendary resistance, and make it clear, boss has legendary resistance. You know this,
right?
That big dumb guy, his charisma's 8, and he has no proficiency in it. But if he hits you, he will knock you to the ground like a tent peg.
Yeah,
you're gonna want to do something about that guy before he starts hitting people. I'm gonna banish him. And you're like,
yep. I've been a high-level warlock fight, and we were fighting demons for months, and it's banishing 2 at a time sometimes.
Yeah, and so because you know you're a DM, you have as many monsters as you want.
Right, exactly.
I can make 20 pit fiends and put them in a battle if I want to. Right? I can do anything I want. So there's no cost for me to add more monsters.
Right,
and there's no cost for me to put monsters in, like, you know, if you've got characters who love doing lots of areas of effect or like doing lots of crowd control, put in a lot of small dudes that want to be hit with areas of effect and crowd control. You know, have a cleric, you know, throw lots of low-level undead at the cleric so that they can hit it, and make sure their CR is at the point where they can be destroyed, so you don't have to have 35 ghouls running away.
Clear out
they
your
just
battle.
Explode. Right, it's fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's you know, when I've rethought encounter building a lot over certainly the past 5, 8, 10 years since my more tactical D&D days.
Well, and because you had to switch from in person to online?
No, my philosophies changed between 4th and 5th edition when they were doing D&D Next.
So you started writing. I wanted to go because you started writing about 15 years ago, which in 2008, which was when fourth edition was out.
Yes. Correct.
But I'm sorry. Continue. Yes, and you started continuing to 5.
Yeah. So like when I played 4th edition, I would say I wasn't ever good at it. I'm not a good tactical DM, but I was definitely like 4th edition was a tactical RPG. It didn't have feet. It used squares. Right. It measured everything in squares, and it had no facing, and fireballs were square. It was square ball. It's not fire square.
Fire square.
Right. And that was how it played out. So I played it that way, and then at the end, and I got frustrated with it because, like, I just, you know, boy, high level 4th edition characters. You think 5th edition high level characters can do zany stuff. 4th edition characters, it was through the roof. It was insane, the kind of stuff that they could do at high level.
Wow.
And just weird stuff. One person would crit, and that gave everybody else a free attack. You have like these exploding crits. It was nuts. Right. So then between 4th and 5th, I played a lot of independent RPGs. I played 13th Age and Dungeon World and Fate and a little bit of Numenera and other stuff in kind of the earliest days. And 5th edition also had a very different philosophy back then than 4th edition did. They really wanted to get back to that kind of the story focused version of D&D, and you can see it in the roots of 5th edition D&D, but D&D Next certainly did. And it really, you know, a lot of the philosophies of these other books, I remember reading Dungeon World, and it said, like, be a fan of the characters. It was like a principle of DMing. And I had never heard it that succinctly and that directive before. It's always like, well, you know, certainly people would be, but a lot of time you're like, I'm more interested in the story than I am in the characters.
Yeah.
Like as a DM, it's very easy to get into your story and your world and your encounters and your stuff more so than you care about the characters.
Sure.
And if you start by saying they're the center of the game, they're the center of the story.
They're the protagonists.
They're the protagonists.
Right.
And so what they do and what they want and where they're going, that matters more, which is why step 1 of the 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master for your game prep is focus on the characters. Read them. Can you name them? Do you know what they want? Do you know who they are and what are they good at? What kind of mechanical abilities do they have that the player enjoys using? Put that in your brain before you do the rest of your prep. And that way the rest of your prep is built around this idea that you're building it for those guys.
Right.
And I think that has proven to be, very useful for my own games, popular for other people.
To that end, I was recently seeing someone talk about this too, where it was like using the characters, the backstory that the players give you to make your job easier as a DM, where it's like, oh, you just gave me hooks you'll bite on every time if I need you to go in direction X or Y. It's like, I know you have problems with your brother, so guess who I'm putting 2 villages over or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I first heard that as knives, as giving someone a knife, right? Like, and I heard that at a convention with on a panel that was on. I never heard the term before, and they brought up this idea that like I like taking knives from my players. That the idea like a knife is like a piece of a backstory that you can then take and then immediately stab the character with, right? And but only in the nicest way, only in the way that propels the interest of the story in a direction that we all like to have it. And certainly, I mean, I'll keep talking about my Storm King's Thunder game, but I had a knife, which was one of the players. Their character was like a lifetime friend of this Frost Giant ally that they had throughout most of the campaign. The Frost Giant ally had sacrificed himself to let them escape from the big dragon. And it turns out the dragon that they hadn't died, and the dragon captured the Frost Giant. And for like most of the game, for like 6 months, I was like, she has him in a brick of amber. And she's like, what am I going to do with this guy? And then she's like, she knows that this character. And so they break into her throne room, and there's a portal to hell on the floor, a big open hole going to hell.
Wow.
And the big amber sarcophagus that shows the living, his name is Harshnag, the living Frost Giant Harshnag. And she just drops it down the hole into hell. And my friend and the character, she's like, I jump right in. And so her character leapt into hell. And talk about like separating the party. You now have a character in hell, and everyone else is in a throne room with 2 ancient blue dragons.
I jump right in. Everyone else is like, I do not.
and I remember the player was like, did you plan that? And I was like, you saw I had 2 battle maps set up, one in hell and one not in hell. So,
did I plan it?
But I was like, I didn't know it was going to work. And even I think I even had the villain was like, wow, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Right. So that's like a knife. Like that was like a character backstory. And I knew how much she cared about this NPC. Right. And the funny thing is the player knew that Harshnag was alive because I had seeded it like in microfiction that I sent over email.
Awesome.
So the player knew Harshnag was alive. The character did not until that moment, but the player had already wired in her mind what she would do when she sees Harshnag again.
I want to point out
17 wants to know, did she die? Did the person that dove into
did
she die?
No, in fact, it was awesome because like I think one of the players had a planar, I forget what they call it, but there's like a planar cube, which lets him teleport in and out of other worlds. And he was I think he was a spell. I can't remember if he's a cleric. I think he might've been. And he was bouncing between hell and the prime world, healing people on both sides.
Whoa.
And yeah, so it really ended up that about half the group was fighting pit fiends in hell. The other half was taking on 2 ancient blue dragons. And they were switching places, like they were jumping back and forth. He would grab somebody and teleport. We need you.
Yeesh.
We need you back up in the prime plane. I'm fighting a pit fiend. We'll be back for the pit fiend, but right now I gotta go.
I want to point out
it was a tremendous. Yeah, it was a 4-hour battle. I mean, it took forever,
God.
but it was really, really fun.
I want to point out
really
Evil John's comment in chat, who's trying
John.
to avoid your ploys by saying all of my players are orphans from a long line of orphans.
right.
They're like, I have no attachments.
Yep, right.
There's nothing you can get me with.
Well, that's the real key, right? We call them knives because we want it, but you want the players to want them.
Yes.
You want the players want to have that story, and sometimes they do stuff way worse than way worse than you would do. Like, I've had that happen a couple of times now, where like the directions that the characters went with, I'm like, wow, that's like DC movie dark. Right?
I am the player for 2 campaigns now on the dungeon run who have handed my DMs a bag of hand grenades. and literally it's just sort of like, make me miserable. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean, I gave my players a geosynchronous satellite that can drop tungsten rods on 1/3 of the planet with the power of a 20 megaton nuclear bomb, and they had 68 of them.
What?
And I'm like, here's, you took it over. What do you want to do with them? Like, blow up factories and like, hammering the earth. And then they went down there. Man, it's cloudy. Like, why is it so cloudy?
All those factories, man.
Yeah, you blew up 62 factories with 20 megaton nuclear bombs.
Oh my goodness!
Guess what happened to the atmosphere?
Amazing.
Do you ever get to play, Mike?
Yeah,
actually, I wanted to ask that too.
Yeah, I just finished my first 5th edition campaign.
Amazing.
Wow.
So I play a lot of it. I did play a lot of Adventures League, and I played in a lot of one-shots. But my friend Chris just ran a 1.5 year long 5th edition campaign in his homebrew world, and I think we got up to 12th level, and we just finished last weekend. So that was the first full campaign that I've got to play in for 5th edition, like for first time in all 5th edition. It was really, we had lots of knives. My guy turned into a werewolf, and so yeah, it was great fun. It was great fun to have a character where I could, develop it and like I think being a DM meant I wasn't a dick about it, which is nice. Like I wasn't, I would say things like, I don't know how werewolf mechanics work. Can I just use this ability that I already have on my character sheet because I'm a rune knight fighter and just say it's a werewolf? And he's like, sure. I'm like, awesome. Like I could change it to a werewolf, and it's all flavor, and mechanic wise, it's not broken, but yeah. So
it can help with your storytelling, I think, too, being able to pull back and sort of seeing like, all right, I think this is kind of where the story's going, but here's how I'm going to subvert it, or here's how I'm going to help, or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
Just making big, bold choices, Yeah. I mean, we don't want to keep you for a whole lot longer, but this has been so amazing. I guess I'm so curious about, so you've been playing tabletop role-playing games and D&D, and whether that is since the mid 80s or since, I mean, how did you decide to start writing? I mean, you seem to have such a knack. You said we pointed out your father was an author.
Yep.
Entirely narrative fiction author, or what? Is that
historical fiction and so right. Illuminatus was sort of a cult science fiction novel, and then he did a lot of historical fiction throughout the 80s.
Amazing.
So about 5 or 6 books.
That kind of, and so you got into sort of tabletop role playing, and then. Mm-hmm. Is that just always something that came naturally to you, kind of playing around with the forum or something, or what? Yeah, I'm so curious.
I mean, role playing was kind of on and off. Like I played a bit in high school, I played a bit in college, then stopped for a long time, and then started playing again when I met my wife and her friends, and we played with her, and that's when I really started again. That was probably 20 years ago. That's probably 2002, I think, it's about 20 years ago where I started playing. I've been playing regularly ever since then.
Still weird to think 2002 is 20 years ago. But go.
I know, right? Yeah. I was looking at it, I was like, wow, Kill Bill is almost 20 years old.
20 years ago.
Just happened to notice that. So, but I've been writing. I like writing always, I mean, it sounds so pretentious.
Go ahead.
But like writing has always been relatively easy to me because I think like I lived with a writer. I saw what that process was like. And I remember there was like a point when I was young where like writing was a pain. I'll be nice and clean.
You're doing great.
So, writing was a pain, but then it got to the point where like, oh, wait a minute, I can really do anything in this. And I remember writing, like I was reading like cyberpunk novels, like William Gibson's, Neuromancer was like my first, one of my favorite novels of all time. I reread it every few years and love it. And I read it as a kid and I was like, I'm writing a cyberpunk story. And I wrote a cyberpunk story and it had like lots of 4-letter words and violence in it. And I turned it into my English teacher and she's like, this is full of 4-letter words and violence. This is terrible. And I'm like, it's what they would say. And she's like, all right, fine. And gave me an A, right? Realism. And I was like, wow. Yeah. And it was like, it's true to the world. Like, look at where they are.
It's also pretty true to the genre.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty true. And I somehow argued for him, like a guy with chrome eyes and half a shaved head with a scorpion tattooed on his head who's an assassin. He doesn't shy away from F-bombs. Right? And she's like, yeah, I guess that would be
fair.
True. So that was when I realized, like, it really opened, like that one moment sort of opened up and I'm like, wow, I can, it sounds again pretentious as hell, but I can make worlds. Like I can do whatever I want with this. And so that practice of writing sunk into me. And throughout college, I wrote like blogs before there were blogs. There weren't blogs back then. This is in the 90s, early 90s. And I wrote like a website back when websites were brand new for Quake, the computer game Quake.
Yeah.
And I remember that the developers of Quake wrote these things called .plans, which was like a blog, but I guess it was like a Unix thing that, you know, you have this .plan file that you'd put your journal into and people could go and read other people's journals.
Cool.
And I was like, I want to do that for me and my friends. So I set up, none of my friends want to do it, but I wrote all the time. And I kept following that through. I got into home theater stuff and wrote that. I got into EverQuest, the massive online game, wrote reams of fan fiction, bad fan fiction of EverQuest for years, you know, 5-6 novels worth of fiction. And so I got used to writing all the time. And so then switching to D&D was just changing the topic. And I never, you know, I said, I'm going to write a blog about D&D. Like 4th edition is brand new. I'm learning it. I wrote some early blog posts on Tumblr back when Tumblr was a thing. About the initial release of 4th edition, and nobody else was writing about it. So that means everybody that was talking about 4th edition was going and reading my blog. And I was like, this is great. I should make this a thing. So I made Sly Flourish and started writing there. But that's always been easy for me to write every week. I've been writing it every week now for whatever it is, 12 years.
Amazing.
And yeah. And then I started reading like bad business books, but there was a couple that I really liked that I thought like these are short books that are really like focused on a topic. I'm like, I want to model this, but I want to do it for D&D. And so I wrote like DM tips, you know, my first book, very short, you know, 24 page, or I don't know how long it was, not a very long book, and did another one for Epic Tier Games, and then did Lazy Dungeon Master. And that, you know, I scaled up these small, you know, staple bound short books
Pamphlets.
of focused.
Yeah, they're pamphlets.
Yeah. Like chapbooks almost for D&D. And then they've gotten more elaborate as I've gone, as I've done it over time, and now it's, you know, it's become what it is. Which is
what's it been like
fantastic
to see, you know, and we talk about it all the time, but what's it been like in the last like 6, 7, 8 years to watch the doors kind of flung so wide open with D&D and seeing it, seeing the young audiences just rushing in and grabbing it with both hands. I mean, what's that kind of been like for you? Having been a fan and also a writer, even, you know, sort of during this whole period.
Yeah. So I remember back in the early 4E days, there was a handful of us blogger folk who knew about all of the other ones. And we would go to Gen Con and meet up and chat. And there was one in particular, my friend Enrique Bertrand, who writes for he writes the Newbie DM blog and has the Newbie DM Twitter handle, and also has a YouTube show and everything like that. And he and I just hit it off. I think we're born in the same month of the same year. And like, we were just really hit it off, and just, we'd get together every Gen Con and chat. And I remember there was like one time, and I think it was in the it was even before the true explosion of 5e, but like we could tell that 5e was different. It was a year or two into 5e. So it was right at the, you know, peak of where it was scaling much higher. And he's like, I don't know anybody that's in this racket anymore. Like, we used to know that there was like 6 bloggers, and you read those and that was pretty much it. And now it's like, I don't even know, like video shows and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's like we're standing on a train platform and a train goes roaring by, and you're like, was that my train? Like, you know, like, where did you're holding your cup of coffee? Like, was that it? Did I just miss, you know? And
was Chris Pine on that train?
Yeah, right. Pine on that train, like Matt Mercer's like, woo!
Yeah, right.
You're like, what was that? Who are those
Whoa.
people? And I remember there was a long time where people, like, you know, there was, you know, not too far back, you'd talk to some folks who have been in this racket for a while, been writing about D&D for a long time, and paying a lot of attention and talking to people, Wizards of the Coast, and doing all this. And they were like, who's Matt Colville? Like, I've never heard of this guy, and now he's got a $1.2 million Kickstarter. Like, who is this guy? And you're like, he's big on YouTube. Oh, I never watch YouTube. And you're like, well,
you should start.
That's right. Where it's happening. So it's easy to have these other sort of vehicles where things pick up. A recent one, another friend of mine, Anthony Joyce Rivera, came. You know, we kind of have a Discord chat where we all kind of hang out, and he's like, I'm doing TikTok stuff now, and we're like, what, like dances? And he's like, yeah, you know, he's like, D&D is big on TikTok.
Mike,
like,
D&D is huge on TikTok.
Right. And we're like, really? Like, what's happening over there?
No joke.
And so
Follow the Dungeon Run on TikTok, everybody.
Are we missing, like, am I missing the boat? So I started, like, I'm like, I have these YouTube shows that I can do, and I can do 1 minute clips from those.
That's
and put
right.
them up on TikTok and see how it goes. And so I've started doing those three a week, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this matter of like, these kind of pillars of explosion where you go on your YouTube page and you're like, I've never seen this guy before. And he's, I had one, my wife had her picture in a video on YouTube that was the number 3 trending YouTube video for like a week of all of YouTube. And it was because a guy did a video about, I can't even remember. It was about D&D, obviously.
Sure.
And he took a picture that I had, he went over the net and grabbed a bunch of photos. And one of them was a photo of a game that I was at, that James Intercasa was running, where my wife was in it. And he took that picture and put it in as an example of a D&D group in this video. And then so I woke my wife woke up and I pulled up YouTube and I said,
D&D.
look at and I'm like, look at this video. She's like, what? And I'm like, it's number 3 on YouTube, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, I hit play. I'm like, YouTube. There you are. And she's like, holy cow! Like, I'm in a video on number 3 on YouTube. So these explosions of popularity that they're just like geysers of tremendous popularity. And when you're kind of in, I don't want to say like in the industry, because what does that even mean? But like when you're deeply involved in this hobby in some way, and you see one of those geysers go off that you did not expect, and you don't know anything about it, and you're like, what is going on? You definitely feel FOMO. You definitely feel like, wow, I missed that boat. That's unfortunate. And it's hard to break past that and go, I'm good. I've got my own thing. I'm happy. I'm helping people. I'm doing what I want to do.
Rising tide, yeah, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
it's okay. Yes. I had somebody today was like, hey, there's a new Kickstarter that's coming out soon for a like DM advice book. They're competing with you. And I'm like, I don't compete with anybody. Like if they do one, that's great. Like, I'm not looking to be better than someone else. I'm looking to do what I can do to help people out. And if they do great. If they do 10 times more, great.
Yeah.
So it's, so overall, it's wonderful. It's wonderful
Amazing.
To watch the hobby explode. And I have the conversation of like, what if it collapses again? Like, what if something happens? We don't know what, but like, what if, turns out
everything's cyclical. In some ways it will.
Right.
It will. In one
someday,
way or
right?
another.
The sun will nova. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, in some way or another, something will drop off. But,
right.
yeah.
And I've had a friend where we're worried, where we've talked about, like, we're worried about the direction that Wizards of the Coast is taking D&D, this hobby that we love, and there's one company that's in charge of the IP, and could they break it? There was a long time we were thinking, like, what if they canceled D&D Beyond before they bought it? What if they just pulled the license from D&D Beyond? What would that do to the hobby? Like, what damage could that cause? And you could see some pencil pusher deciding, hey, we're paying too much or we're not getting enough money for this license. We're going to kill it and do our own thing 2 years from now, and irrevocably hurt the brand. And mine is like, hey, I was there when it was small before,
right.
and I still did all the same stuff. I hope I will continue to do the same stuff,
right?
However small it is, because all I need is me and my 5 friends.
Right.
The game is so much more resilient than like a computer game where it's like, if Bungie decides to stop doing Destiny 2, that game's done, right? You can't play it without Bungie. But D&D, like, I don't need anybody. I've got books here that will last longer than my life.
Amazing.
And as long as I got me and one other person who wants to play, I can play a game.
People are going to be reading The Lazy Dungeon Master for a very long time.
I hope, right? That would be great. That, of course, is my dream, right? That they find enough use that it has long legs and lasts. But I was also happy when only a handful of people were reading the stuff that I was doing. So I hope I can still feel that way. Yeah.
JP Couvert asked a great question, because I know on that note, I mean, it just want to make sure we shout out some indie games, indie systems, smaller games or adventures, lesser known stuff, any types of systems that you particularly enjoy. You mentioned Fate earlier. You mentioned
Fate Condensed, right?
Yeah.
So the one I'll pitch, Fate Condensed. Talk about like a game that can last through nuclear holocaust, right? This it's a short book. It's I don't even know how many pages it is. It doesn't have page numbers. It's so short it doesn't even use page numbers. It's like 64 pages, but
Amazing.
You can buy it for like $5.
Wow.
And you can run any RPG in any world with this one system. And I've been using it. I've written for it. I wrote a cyberpunk stuff, right? I wrote a cyberpunk adventure called Aeon Wave that was based on the previous versions of this. But it's just, it's like this tiny floppy book, and it's so powerful. It's so good.
That's the one you take camping, so you don't have to
Right.
take all of your books. You just take that. And
You just take this and some dice, and you're good to go. And it's also the only system I know of where you could run a one-shot game that includes character creation, because it's so fast to build a character and get going. But it's still crunchy enough that it's still an RPG. It's not just pure freeform improvisation. It's actual, real, crunchy mechanics. But you can make any kind of character you want to make. It's really, really a solid game. So yeah, I love Fate Condensed. On the far spectrum, I was talking to a friend of mine. If you've ever heard of Mjorkberg, have you ever heard of Mjorkberg?
No.
Oh yes, I have, but I've never played it. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it in the lights, but the eyes are shiny silver. So, no, I think it's the other one.
It looks like a typo the first time you see the title. You're like, what is
right.
that called?
Like, I want a book, like you can't even read the title, right? But look at the shiny eyes, right? So Mjorkberg is I can't remember what country it's from. Oh, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible.
Scandinavia sounds probably.
Yeah. And it's like, you remember back in the 80s, the Satanic Panic, and they there was a bunch of people that were going against D&D because they're like, oh, it's full of the same. They would be right if it was this one, right? Like this one, if they were like, Mjorkberg is full of things they're gonna turn your children into terrible people. You wouldn't have much room to stand on. If you
You're like, you're right a little bit.
But it is also like it is a very polarizing book. Like the art is it's so stylistic.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
In the internal art.
Very goth.
And super it's a death metal,
Amazing.
a death metal RPG.
It's definitely Swedish or Norwegian.
Super lightweight. Yeah, super
Masks
lightweight.
says in chat, Mork means sweet dark in Swedish, so it's almost
it's Swedish, right?
Yeah.
And it's all zine like. It's all like this kind of zine style.
Yeah.
So I love the style of that a lot. I've played a solo game because I think like you can't really enjoy Mjorkberg unless you're in the dark, in the woods, like it's 4 a.m, nobody knows you're there, and you're playing by yourself with you and the worms.
Wow.
Yeah, so like it's a really good one. Blades in the Dark.
Stay tuned for our Mjorkberg stream, everybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Tough to keep that family friendly.
Yeah. I mean, there's tremendous amounts of like third party. There's a lot of what I'm kind of looking forward to is the explosion of 5e compatible third party stuff.
Yeah.
We've seen Level Up 5e by N-World. I'm sure we're going to see other people. There've been a few very like small independent 5 Torches Deep. Is that what it's called? 5 Torches Deep?
I don't know that one.
I think it's called 5 Torches Deep. And there's a lot of sort of hybrid 5e stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing more stylistic RPGs that are fully compatible with Aspergenesis. My friend Rich Lescaflair has a science fiction RPG called Aspergenesis. That is a science fiction 5e game that is fully 5e compatible, but also its own independent science fiction RPG. And really fantastic. Like the production quality on that is as good as anything you'd find in third party in third or first party publishing.
Aspergenesis. I'll look that up.
Yeah, Aspergenesis, really, really great. So there's so many. Numenera. This game I've been talking about.
Yeah.
Is a Numenera based game. Numenera is made by Monty Cook Games. Monty Cook was a developer for the 3rd edition of D&D, and so that certainly counts as an independent RPG, right? It's a small.
What was the Monty Cook? The Monty Cook one that just had that huge Kickstarter about the of something of the Appalachia, something like Gods of Appalachia or something.
Gods of Appalachia, yeah. I haven't gotten that one yet. I don't know if that's been delivered yet. So
I don't think they've delivered it yet.
But that one's pretty cool. Yeah, Monty Cook Games is just nailing out of the park. I've got a whole shelf full of Monty Cook Games stuff. And they're doing a lot of 5e stuff. I got the 5e version of Tolus. Tolus is, talk about like, this one I'm gonna hurt my back.
Please don't hurt yourself.
It's like a phone book. It's like a phone book sized city source book for a world called Tolus, or it's a city campaign, a campaign city book.
Wow.
Called Tolus. I think it's 700 pages.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's
like a big city.
667 pages.
It literally is a phone book.
It's just the people who live in Tolus.
It's just all NPCs, right? It's all NPCs and how to communicate with them.
Amazing.
But just there's so much. That's what I'm really excited about in this hobby is the amazing amount of really, really great material.
Amazing.
That's coming out both for just 5th edition.
Yeah.
Like just 5th. I mean, Tal'Darai, right? By Darrington Press, by
Critical Role,
by the Critical Role company. Gorgeous book, just beautiful book, and amazing stuff.
Tal'Darai Reborn, right? Yes,
Tal'Darai Reborn. I've got that. Oh, it's amazing. So it's just You can tell, like, I'm just excited about
I know
that's coming out. I could just talk forever about all these great products.
it's amazing. So,
yeah.
I mean, we want to wrap up. We don't want to keep you too late because I know you're on the East Coast, but
Yeah, I turn into a pumpkin.
it's amazing. But you've got a Patreon, you've got a Kickstarter. So, I mean, what like you talked about, like the heist and like that you basically sometimes just give away what do you call it? The kind of scenarios or whatever it is that you can just plug into different places. Is that what your normal Patreon content is, or what?
Yeah, it's what it's become.
Mm-hmm.
So my Patreon originally started as like a support the work that I do, right? Support my website and my other stuff. But I've been putting out products there. What I found is that has been a wonderful incubator for things that I'm working on.
Cool.
So the Lazy DM's Companion, I think almost every page, maybe every page that was in Lazy DM's Companion, patrons got to see up to like a year earlier. And they would get it. I would put out 1 or 2 pages a month. I would get feedback from them on what works, what doesn't, what makes sense. We have a Patreon Discord channel where they could do it. Mm-hmm. So, I was listening to a movie director recently who said, like, when you're doing art, you want to do it and I think Stephen King said this too. You want to do it with the door closed, like do your art independently and do it with the door closed. And only when you're done and when you're ready to start then you open the door and let people kind of see what you're doing. And then this director, who was very opinionated about lots of things, was like, you don't make a movie for people. You make your movie, and then maybe they'll like it. And just like, fine, but it's like, boy. On the other hand, I have been making it in the open. I have been.
That's like, very brave. Yeah.
Putting a page out, getting feedback on it, changing it around, and I have found it to be tremendously rewarding. And I think the products are way better. Like the Lazy DM's Companion, I'm very, very proud of that book. Awesome. And I'm really proud of it because like it was all pretty thoroughly tested over like a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple of the big thing that I've been working on now that patrons are getting, and the Patreon's also really, it's a steal. It's $2 a month and they get a lot of stuff for $2 a month. And one of the things is I've been working on a thing called the City of Arches, which is a city source book for a city that's, a lich used to run it, and it's got all of these ancient archways that used to be portals to other worlds, but now they're all dead, except on occasion somebody will wander through from the other side and they won't have any memory of where they came from, which means it's this wonderful melting pot where any race that you could pick from any 5e game makes sense because they could have walked through one of these archways. But it also breaks away from the idea that like all orcs are evil because, or, even I ran a scenario where a horned devil stepped through and he's got this huge spiked chain and he's like, my name is Ixalasix, I forget. And they're like, welcome to the City of Arches. Here's your gift basket with your soaps and your artistic cheeses and your warm robe and your blanket. Go enjoy the baths. We have public baths you can enjoy. He's like, and he's standing there holding his gift basket with the cheeses. And he's like, he hands his giant spike chain over to somebody. He's like, all right, I guess I'll go to the baths. Right. And then they go there and he's like swimming and enjoying himself. And next thing you know, he'll be a chef. Right. So the idea is you can have this
amazing.
City. Yeah, but it also is like filled with ruins and filled with ancient stuff and huge threats. Like the lich wants to come back. The guy who used to run the place wants to return. So there's lots of room for adventure. It's sort of like a nice version of a city from like Elden Ring or Dark Souls,
right? Where
the city's really nice. Below there, it's really terrible. And so patrons have been getting like 2 or 3 pages of that a month, where I'll add in a new thing and I'll add an adventure. The heist. The heist adventure generator that I was talking, the heist scenario I was talking about, is something that's coming out this month for patrons.
Amazing.
And what's great is one day, like I'll get it to a point like, okay, it's ready to turn into a bigger book, and then we'll run a Kickstarter and get artwork and design and editing and everything else and make it into a more formal book. I don't know when. It might take a while, but it's been really
you
good.
Definitely seem like a busy guy.
I was gonna say, man, giving yourself a lot.
I have a lot of irons.
Will people be able to get Lazy DM's Companion? You said you delivered it already for Kickstarter.
Yes, it's for sale right now.
You can sale on your website. Amazing.
Yeah, you go to slyflourish.com, right hand side if on a website, or if you go there's a list of books. Lazy DM Companion is one of those books, and you can go buy it and you'll get a physical copy. You can buy all 3 of my books are now offset printed, so you can get beautiful print copies of all 3 of the Lazy DM books.
I couldn't recommend it more, and I feel like we could keep talking for hours and hours on end. Mike,
I could.
Yeah.
Yes.
There were several questions that we didn't get to, but that means you're just gonna have to come back on the
show.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And when you're out in LA, let us know. We'll bring you to the studio.
All right.
Sure.
But yeah, this has been amazing, Mike. So yeah, go find Sly Flourish on Twitter, on YouTube, on pretty much all the socials. You are findable that way, and slyflourish.com. Yes.
Yeah, slyflourish.com, and has links to all the other places. So if you're
Incredible.
interested, subscribe to the newsletter. Newsletter subscription gets you access to all kinds of things, and everything else is linked off of that site. Sure.
Wow, yeah, but this has been so great, and such. And as I think I told you near the start, a lot of our audience is pretty new to D&D. They found us and kind of started playing D&D around the dungeon run and inspired by, and it's such a compliment to us. So we love exposing them to people like yourself who are really just here to make their lives easier. But yes, this has been amazing.
I will say this as one final tip.
Please,
because I've been quiet for quite some time now.
I told you, I warned you.
I know. Hey, it makes my job easier. I will say this: if you are new to DMing, or if you want to dip your toe into DMing, or if you're a player and your DM just needs a break and you want to give he or she that break, go pick up a copy of The Lazy Dungeon Master. It will definitely make your job much, much easier if you're getting into this for the first time. It breaks through a lot of those barriers that dungeon masters tend to have, where they over prepare and they over plan and they write novels worth of stuff that never gets to come to the surface. And your tips help cut through all of that, so somebody can just get right to the meat, right to the juice, and make those players enjoy themselves and shine. But also, as a DM, you get to enjoy that as well. You get to, you get to play in your own sandbox too.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add is Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is probably the book to start with. There is a original Lazy Dungeon Master, but Return is the updated. This one. Yeah, that's the one.
There it is. There it is.
That is fully updated. That is the one that I think really has the longest legs.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
Thank you. And thank you, Chad. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you Wednesday night for episode 7. We got a lot more fun stuff happening. We're still in the middle of a battle, I believe. We'll see you 6 p.m. Pacific Wednesday night back here at twitch.tv/thedungeonrun. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mike Shea, Sly Flourish. Have an amazing night. And thanks, everybody. Bye.